Story 1. Neighbor from hell tries to steal our house. Faces karma when her own actions get her slapped with $200,000 bill. Before we get started, let's introduce the main characters. Entitled neighbor will be called Ian going forward, and the spoiled son of the entitled neighbor will be asked for entitled son. There will also be the previous owner of our house, who will be called P.O., though they have a limited part in this story. Also keep in mind while reading this story that from the time that we bought the house to the current day was almost 15 years, so unless otherwise stated, you can assume that there was a pretty big gap between most events that took place. Let's get started. In order to properly build up to the climax and set the stage for the events that took place, first I have to give a little background. Most of this happened before we bought and moved into this house. So Ian owned a very large chunk of property which was down the road from a popular recreational lake in our area. I say down the road, but it's actually a pretty fair distance away. Even though the road that Ian lives on is the only road leading to multiple lakefront properties and resorts, along with the most popular boat dock on this side of the lake, so the properties here aren't extremely valuable that normal people can't afford them, but there are some extremely valuable properties down the road with very rich people driving by all the time. This will be relevant later in the story. Karen, being quite wealthy and owning a very large chunk of property, ended up splitting her property off into 4 roughly equal sections when her children came of age. One she gave to her daughter, who somehow is a pretty decent person considering the rest of her family. Then another section she gave to ES. She built houses for them on both of the properties, roughly to her children's specifications. Then on the 4th bit of property, the one that did not have her own house on it, she built a small convenience store. This will also be relevant later on. Now I'm not sure why, probably to avoid possible future disputes or something, she actually ended up giving the deeds to her children for their respective houses and properties. You can probably tell where this is going. Well, while the respectable daughter was pretty respectable, ES, or perhaps I should change it to irresponsible son, was a party maniac. Everyone in the neighborhood at the time absolutely hated him. He would throw loud, obnoxious late-night parties almost every single night and keep people awake. The police apparently had someone stationed nearby because they were called on him so often. Often it probably didn't help his entitlement that mommy paid all of the bills for him. She kept everything in her name: water, electricity, garbage, everything. They all went to her mailbox. Well, all except for one, that is. Since the property was in his name, so was the property tax, which he never gave to Ian and instead just ignored. I guess Ian either just didn't think about it or assumed that he was paying for it himself. Either way, it didn't come as a surprise when the police showed up at his house, but it did when he did not come back and the house went up for auction. At this point, the house was in shambles, holes in the drywall, and even the living room floor had a huge hole leading down into the garage/basement. The kitchen floor and subfloor needed to be totally replaced. Almost all of the walls were covered in mud. Basically, his irresponsibility and party habits left the house in what the banks considered an unlivable condition. Because of that, the only people who could afford it were those who could pay out of pocket for it. Enter P.O. P.O. was a house flipper, not one of the big wealthy ones that you see on TV, but more of a hobbyist than anything. He was retired, and he flipped houses to keep him busy and active. P.O. would buy a house like this one super cheap on auction, fix it up himself, and then put it back on the market. While he fixed it up, he would live off of the profit from the previous house, and typically about the time he finished fixing one up and buying the next one, his profit would have about run out. Any that he had left over just went into an emergency savings fund, which he said wasn't anything special anyway. We were in the market for a new place but couldn't afford anything super expensive on our budget. But when we saw this place on a website for sale, it seemed perfect. It was the perfect size and in the perfect neighborhood, and even down the road from the lake, which we love fishing in and boating. So it was perfect in almost every way, or at least it looked that way. We were scared of the price, which wasn't listed on the website yet, but it wouldn't hurt to at least have a look and see. We drove by to look at it and found P.O. working on it. We stopped in to say hi and asked the price. He explained that he was planning to fix it up and sell it, and that his realtor just added it to the website's database to make it easier and more efficient when he was ready to actually sell it. Anyway, we sat down and had a nice chat with him, just being friendly and all, and he appreciated the company. We explained that we would be willing to buy it from him for a reasonable price considering its current condition and the work he'd already put into it. He had it about half finished. We explained that we would love to finish it and live in it as a forever home. He turned us down, explaining that he already had several offers for it and didn't feel right selling it to us and that we could buy it for the full price when he was finished. So we kindly thanked him and left our number, asking him to call us if he ever changed his mind, which he promised he would. Less than 2 weeks later, we actually got an unexpected call from him. He explained that his sister had come down sick in another state and that he wanted to go and be with her and would not have enough time or patience to finish the house. He explained that the house was not up to code, but if we could find a way to buy it, then he'd be happy to sell it to us for a reasonable price. We happily agreed and ran out looking for banks. We had a few connections from a realtor friend of ours who actually helped us find a bank willing to loan the money to buy the house with a few conditions attached. Basically, we would have 2 weeks to bring the house up to code. Otherwise, they could default on the loan and auction it off. After explaining the situation to P.O., he offered to help as much as he could. He couldn't actually do any work to the house because he was in such a rush, but he explained exactly what we needed to do to bring it up to code and meet the bare minimum requirements, how much time and effort it would take, and how much money it would cost. He even offered to help us out another way. We took out a loan for twice what he actually wanted for the house, and he gave us back the other half. We used that money for repairs to the house. After the work he'd already put in, the house was so close to meeting code that we could probably have done it ourselves, but just in case, we called in a few friends and got it knocked out in half the time. After getting it up to code, however, there was still plenty of work that needed to be done, and so we spent several months replacing flooring and subflooring, rewiring wires, patching holes in the walls, replacing old, ugly, literally decomposing wallpaper that was stuck directly to the drywall. You get the point. We put a ton of work into the place. Then it was finally time to move into our dream home. It still had a few issues that we would fix down the road as we went on, but it was finally time to move in. We weren't even finished moving in yet when Ian came over to introduce herself. As we were working things out with P.O. in the very limited time that we had, he had warned us over and over about Ian and her entitled attitude. At first, Ian was extremely nice, and we had no idea why P.O. warned us about her so much. Then it happened. As we were wrapping up our conversation, she explained to us in a very kind and compassionate way that our house actually belonged to her and that we had 30 days to get out. She said that she felt sorry for us since we were scammed so badly, but that it was actually her house and that P.O. had no right to sell it to us at all. We'd heard horror stories about people being scammed like that before, so you could imagine our terror when she explained all of this to us. We were horrified that we had put in all of this time and effort and money into this dream house and now we were going to lose it just like that because we fell for some guy's scam. We thanked her for explaining it to us and being so nice and said that we would talk to the bank and P.O. and get it all figured out. So that's what we did. We talked to the bank, who confirmed that P.O. was the actual owner of the deed. We spoke to the realtor, who also testified the same thing. We spoke to P.O., who explained that they accused him of stealing the house multiple times after he bought it at auction and that he was harassed by her constantly over the house. Everyone that we spoke to had the exact same story. We even went up to the courthouse and confirmed that our name was on the deed. During this process is when we heard the backstory about ES from several neighbors. N came by not long after this and asked us when she could expect us to be moved out, which we explained would never happen as we legally own the property, and it wasn't our fault that ES lost the property. We apologized for the loss that she had and explained that we knew it was probably really hard to lose her family property like that because of her son's negligence. But that was not our fault and we weren't just going to give her a property that we bought with our own hard-earned money and worked so hard to fix up. Then Ian, realizing that we knew the situation, decided to go into a long sob story about how this property had been in her family for generations and that she couldn't bear to lose it, and how P.O. had stolen it from them when they were caught up in the confusion of their child being arrested. We asked why they didn't bid for the house and buy it back after he lost it, considering that we bought it from P.O. for only about $50K, and considering that he was still making a small profit on that even after all of the work and materials he'd put into it before selling it to us. They could have easily bought it for next to nothing on auction and had it back. Ian explained that she felt the house and property were being stolen from them and that they refused to pay for something that rightfully belonged to them. We apologized once more but explained that there was no way we were going to take a loss on the property, especially after all of the time and effort that we put into it and the additional materials that we bought for it, just to make her happy. However, we were sympathetic to her situation and offered to sell the house to her for a very reasonable price, $100,000. Which, considering its location and how fixed up it is, that was still just over half of its total market value. We, after buying it from PO for $50K and putting an additional $30K into materials plus several months of hard labor to fix it up, felt that was a very reasonable price. We didn't say anything, but we would even be willing to go down to $90K if she wanted to negotiate with us. She immediately counteroffered with $40,000, explaining that she shouldn't have to pay anything at all for something that rightfully belongs to her. When we said that was way too low, she responded by saying that she understood how much effort we put into it and that we had to buy a lot of materials to fix it up, so she would be nice and throw in an extra $10,000 for all the stuff we did to the house. When we told her that $50K was what we bought the house for from PO, she got upset and called us liars and thieves, saying the house was a complete dump and that there was no way it was worth that much. Not only had she resorted to name-calling at this point, but going as far as to call our dream home a dump after all the blood and sweat and tears, not to mention dollars, that we poured into it. We were done with her BS and kindly asked her to get out of our house, explaining that she was no longer welcome here and that we would never sell our house to her even if she offered us double the market value. She obviously got upset about this and threw all kinds of insults at us as she walked out the door. Later we found out that she was spreading all kinds of rumors about us throughout the neighborhood, saying that we stole the house from her and all kinds of other stupid stuff. At first, we ignored it, thinking that no one would actually believe it. Then a guy pulled into our driveway with a gun, threatening us to get out now. We'd never met him before, but we had heard of him. He apparently considered himself to be the peacekeeper of the neighborhood and confronted anyone who caused problems like this. Most of the people in our neighborhood actually liked him, saying he was a pretty reasonable guy, and being a very rural neighborhood where plenty of not-so-law-abiding citizens live, most people greatly appreciated his presence. He actually did work hard to keep the neighborhood as peaceful as possible and did way more than the cops actually do most of the time. Anyways, just a note, our neighborhood is split into two primary sections. One section is filled with mostly old retired people. It's very nice and peaceful. Everyone gets along. The other is filled with the less law-abiding people further into the wilderness and away from prying eyes. We live at the edge of the peaceful part, separated by about a mile or so of woodland and farmland. So, hearing about him before and assuming based on descriptions that this was the same guy, we decided to test out that hypothesis. We told him that we had no idea what was going on and invited him in for a beer and chat. We allowed him to bring his gun but told him that we would be bringing our own as well. Almost everyone in my town has a gun. There are more gun stores than there are dollar stores, if that says anything. So we weren't really worried about him having a gun with him. That doesn't really mean much in our town. It's just a way of saying, hey, I'm capable of defending myself if this gets out of hand. Now, if someone pointed it at you, which he didn't, then that would be a different story. But back to the main story. He agreed, and after a few hours of chatting and explaining the situation, he explained that he figured it was something like that and apologized for the misunderstanding. He explained that he got caught up in the rumors and flipped a switch and that it wouldn't happen again. He also thanked us for buying it, explaining that when ES moved out, everyone was much happier. He didn't have to hear people complaining about loud music and drunk/high teenagers stumbling down the middle of the road in the middle of the night and nearly getting run over. We all had a good laugh about it afterward, and he left without saying another word. Now time for the reason that Mr. Peacekeeper believed the rumor so easily. This is a bit of a side story, but it's also a major turning point and when everything started to go downhill for Ian. I also want to add that the events of this side story do overlap a little bit with the events of the next part of the story, but let's get on to it. So I mentioned that Ian split off 1/4 of her property to build a convenience store. Well, this store was extremely popular in the neighborhood, and being right in the middle basically, it was in a perfect location. It wasn't popular for their prices, they actually overcharged for everything by quite a bit, and it wasn't popular for their customer service either, which included and was mostly limited to thank you for your purchase as you walked out the door. Sometimes they would give you a refund though if you found mold on the food that you bought from them, so that was nice, I guess. Anyways, they were so popular because they were the only convenience store for miles. If you had to buy groceries and didn't want to drive all the way to town, then they were just a skip and a hop away for most people. Heck, we even put aside our differences and shopped there on many occasions. I mean, they were literally next door to us, after all. But aside from that, the popularity of their small store allowed them to build up quite a reputation in our neighborhood. A very positive one. Everyone wanted to keep their convenience little store, and they would dare anyone to try and take it from them. I suppose I could kind of see the sentiment there, and that's back when everyone thought that Ian and her family were pretty good people. So when Ian started spreading rumors, people tended to listen. The rumors about us stealing an entire house from her just blew over because everyone knew that was just ridiculous, but for the most part, people still trusted her. But people did believe the other rumors, and trust me, there were plenty, but they were mostly small, petty stuff that no one ever cared about. Let me just say that even assuming all of the rumors about us were true, there was much more that could be said about some other people in our neighborhood. So no one ever paid any attention to them. They did avoid us, however. Considering that Ian had obvious beef with us and no one wanted on her bad side in fear of being banned from her store, they all just ignored us and left us to our own devices. After a few years, however, ES finally got out of prison, and, having nowhere left to go, Ian allowed him to move back in. She didn't like the idea of him living with Mommy, so she rented him an apartment above her convenience store, and she absolutely forbade any wild parties on her property ever again. He didn't actually have to pay rent though. All he had to do was run the store for them when they were busy with other things, which wasn't even all that often. However, even after all of this stuff happened, ES still did not learn his lesson. Obviously, while he was running the register, he would often double charge for items and pocket the extra money. We found this several times and went back in for a refund. They always made up the excuse that the register was broken. After noticing a pattern, however, we brought this to the attention of Ian, letting her know that her son was double charging people for items and probably pocketing the extra. Even though Ian was pretty entitled, even she didn't go so far as to do something so obviously illegal, and we liked her little store and didn't want anything to happen to it. However, instead of thanking us for bringing this to her attention, she told us that we were imagining things and, in a very nice way, told us to screw off. So we very kindly complied with her request. We also shared the information with some of our friends in the neighborhood. It had taken years to actually get to the point where some of them would even look at us, let alone talk to us, thanks to Ian, but we had finally made some friends. Bringing Christmas treats to your neighbors every year is a good way to brighten up someone's day. But anyway, they thanked us, even though they let us know that they didn't actually believe it. However, the word did quickly spread through the neighborhood. Then very quickly came Mr. Peacekeeper. He pulled up in our driveway again. This time he was a lot friendlier. He mostly ignored the rumors about us, knowing that most of them were fake, and we'd actually talked to him several times since then, not on any serious matters, mostly on more friendly terms. He stopped by for a beer every now and then and just chatted about happenings in the neighborhood and asked us our opinion on a few things. He did this with everyone, speaking to most people at least once a year to stay up to date and make sure everything remained nice and calm. He didn't like the idea of police hanging around, so he made up his mind to do their job better so they wouldn't have to. But everyone, including us, really liked this arrangement. It meant you could let your kids walk down to the lake unaccompanied, even through the bad parts of the neighborhood. That being said, he absolutely did not like the rumors that we were spreading about our neighbors and especially their little shop. He explained that he had already talked to them and they felt it was just a misunderstanding due to register issues, and if we did not want a problem, we would stop those rumors right then and there. We wanted to show him proof, but we knew that he probably wouldn't believe it if we did. He really liked Ian and would generally take her word over ours, and since they blew it off as a register error, there was probably nothing we could do to convince him. So we agreed and apologized for any issues, explaining that we just felt wronged and sincerely wanted to protect the few friends that we'd made in the neighborhood. He accepted that apology, giving us one final warning, and left without saying much. So we just listened and made up our minds to stop shopping there unless we absolutely had to. But everything changed after a couple more years. After we had pointed it out and the rumors spread around the neighborhood, even though Mr. Peacekeeper himself went around and told every single person that they were false rumors started by us because of our property feud with Ian, I'll get to that a little later, people actually started paying more attention to their receipts after shopping there and started noticing the same patterns that we had. Over this time, ES probably pocketed untold amounts of money, and Ian definitely knew about it but chose to do nothing and just tried to silence people with rumors. However, the thing about small country stores like that, they are completely dependent on their regulars that live in the neighborhood that they are set up in. During the warmer months when people are vacationing and having fun, they make a huge profit, but not enough to sustain themselves through the winter. And then it happened. Mr. Peacekeeper finally connected the dots. And boy was he angry. We could hear him all the way next door cursing out ES to his face and Ian there with him. You can't even imagine how satisfying that was. But that was only the beginning. Not only did he go off on them, but also went door to door that same day and let every single person in the neighborhood know exactly what they were doing, even taking a pile of receipts with him to show anyone who wanted proof. Now, if there was anyone in the neighborhood who was trusted more than Ian, it was Mr. Peacekeeper. Literally, in the course of 24 hours, he had completely ruined their business. Everyone in the neighborhood stopped coming. They still did pretty well over the summer months because of vacationers and winter birds that didn't know anything, but when winter hit and those crowds were gone, they started hemorrhaging money. After 2 winters, they were forced to close their store for the winter months. However, that also meant that they had to throw away more than 90% of their stock every fall and buy it all again fresh every spring. I guess that doing it wasn't very economical, so they ended up permanently closing shop after 3 more years. That was when their reputation in the neighborhood started to tank, and thanks to that, people started actually respecting us more, and we were actually able to make some friends without having to put in a ton of extra effort. People stopped ignoring us and treating us like we were plagued. But that was just the beginning of Ian's downfall. Unfortunately, to get to the climax of the story, I need to do a little more background work. Sorry that this is starting to turn into a small book, but this shouldn't take too long, I don't think. So something about Ian is that she is extremely, and I mean extremely, nosy. We cannot even walk outside without her watching our every step through her window or going outside to walk her dog or pick up her lawn or pull weeds or whatever excuse she can come up with at the time. You can pretty much guarantee that if we are walking around our property, she is outside as well. It's not like we have anything to hide, but we obviously aren't on the best terms with her and don't really like someone staring at everything we do. We have plans to set up a small pool and hot tub out back, and really don't want to be watched while we're trying to relax in our bathing suits. So we started looking into a privacy fence. Wanting to be nice neighbors, we kindly informed Ian that we would be putting up a fence, to which she adamantly rejected. To which we informed her that we would be putting up a privacy fence. However, we still had to live with her, so we offered to discuss with her the details of the fence, the color, shape, etc. We wanted to make sure that she didn't have to stare at something that she thought to be an eyesore all day every day, considering that staring toward our property seemed to be her favorite pastime. Honestly, we still go out of our way to be the best neighbors that we can, even after all the crap she's put us through. But back to the story. So we want to make sure there is no dispute about where we put the fence. So we plan to put it a foot over our property across the entire property line just to avoid any disputes. By the way, this is before ES got out of jail. We went to the courthouse and paid for a copy of the deed along with a map of our property lines. We were honestly shocked to find that about 1/3 of our property was being claimed by Ian. She had a small shed on it and even a garden. You see, there is actually a line of trees that goes through our property. It's not a straight box property like you find in some states. It's more of a half hexagon or a trapezoid-like shape. Weird property lines are pretty common where I live. Anyways, there is a line of trees that cuts through part of our property that, according to the deed and property map, is like a little triangle section, but the trees make it a square. Ian was claiming the other side of the trees as her own property. When we brought this up to her, she completely freaked out again, calling us liars and thieves and all kinds of other stuff. We didn't care too much about that property because we had lived here for years thinking that it actually was hers. So to make things easier on everyone, we offered to sell it to her or to even trade for a portion of her property. There was a portion of her property that connected with ours that was extremely inconvenient to take care of, and extending it out a little would really make it easier to deal with, not to mention it would give us more room to do stuff that we wanted to do. She flatly refused, saying that she would never pay for something that already belonged to her, and she wouldn't even think about giving us her property for nothing, especially after we already stole this property from her. Since then, there has been a huge ongoing property dispute between us. Now, something about the place I live, as I mentioned previously, it's a very rural area with many strange property lines, and property lines are very often not cut and dry. Many deeds are hundreds of years old, and instead of saying X feet in Y direction, they use temporary landmarks like large oak tree to large rock next to stream. Many of these landmarks could be describing multiple things or could even have disappeared over 100 years ago. So to say that there are a lot of property disputes in our area would probably be an understatement. That, along with the fact that at times a very small portion of property can go for a lot of money in some situations, has led our state to create a lot of very strict laws and regulations governing property disputes, surveyors, etc. As a side note, just a few years ago, a landowner won a property dispute against a very large corporation over just 0.1 acres of land that cost the corporation and earned the man over $1 million. Back on topic, all of that being said, our property lines were pretty cut and dry since she created them herself fairly recently. However, that does not change the fact that laws regarding it are very strict, particularly when it comes to surveyors. So a surveyor might be easily bribed by a large corporation facing the loss of millions of dollars for a tiny piece of land like in the example above. But that's not fair to the proper landowner. So how do you balance that? Well, you make it so the surveyor has everything to lose from lying, and so does the person who bribed or blackmailed them. The laws in our state determine that if a surveyor, even by honest mistake, gives a bad survey by even a few feet, not only can they be given a hefty fine, but they will also lose their license and never be allowed to survey again in the state. On top of that, they must notify and refund all of their clients for up to 10 years before the incident occurred. The clients then have the option to request an additional survey by a non-affiliated surveyor at the expense of the original surveyor. That's every customer up to 10 years prior to the incident and every one since then as well. If they were not found to be accepting a bribe or blackmail, then the previous clients can also sue them for any damages that were caused by any changes to the property line due to their bad survey, as well as charging them appropriate rent for any property that the surveyor may have left out during that time. If a surveyor was found to be accepting a bribe or blackmail, then all damages and additional fees go toward the one who bribed or blackmailed them accordingly. This, along with the loss of time and money from being in courts and the general hassle caused to them, makes it so that surveyors in my area will actively avoid anything that even resembles a property dispute. So when a dispute occurred, you can imagine that it was not as easy as making a phone call and getting a surveyor down here. It was also an unexpected expense as well. Unfortunately, before we could find someone, Ian found someone, and I guess she bribed them or something because they gave the property line exactly how Ian described it. Well, except for one little part she didn't like. I guess she didn't mention that to them. Our property apparently stretches to about a foot from her house. Oh, that was fun to play around with. But that was nothing near the property that she is literally trying to steal from us now. Whenever we are able to find a surveyor, she always seems to nonchalantly introduce herself to them and mention that she already had her portion of the property surveyed, and throw in a few subtle hints that there might be a property dispute involved. This instantly scares off anyone who might be interested in surveying our property after we explain what that could mean for them. I'm sure you understand why. Oh, did I forget to mention that the landmarkers from the bank surveyor when we bought the property conveniently disappeared before we actually moved in? No? Well, they did somehow. I wonder how that happened. Guess we'll never know. Well, anyway, at this point it would probably cost us as much as that piece of land is worth, or maybe even more, to actually hire a surveyor if we can even find someone willing to do it, which everyone we found so far has given us absolutely ridiculous quotes for obvious reasons. I mean, they are basically putting their entire lives on the line here. But we are currently saving up to try to hire someone. And that brings us to just a few months ago, the climax of this story. Sorry for the long backstory, but let's get to the main event now that we are fully caught up on the situation at hand. So a few months ago, there was a very bad storm that ended up knocking down a tree on the disputed property. This tree was actually right next to the road, so when it fell, it destroyed part of our other neighbor's property, the one that lives across the street from us. That's not all. It also totaled someone's brand new sports car while they were driving down the street. Thankfully, no one was hurt during all of this, but the cleanup did take several days. Just enough time for us to receive a bill in the mail for over $200,000. Literally more than our house and property were worth after we fixed it up. Okay, malicious compliance. So just a little more backstory for anyone who might not know. Most property or home insurance will not cover damages to other people's property. That's typically on you, and even if someone is on public property like a road, If your property damages theirs and you could have reasonably prevented it, for example, cutting down a tree next to the road before it fell in a bad storm, then you are 100% responsible for the damages caused by it. Well, at least that's how it works where I live. So when we got the bill in the mail from an unknown rich person's insurance company for their totaled sports car, we called them up and very kindly let them know that the tree that fell was not on our property. They asked us a few questions and said that they would investigate the matter and get back to us. About a week later, we received another letter from the insurance company with a copy of the deed and the property line printout with the tree in question circled in red, showing that it was very clearly on our property. They were demanding full payment within 30 days of their first notice, or they would be taking us to court. That was about 2 weeks, give or take, at this point. So we called them again and explained once more that it was not on our property. At first, the agent argued with us a little, explaining in much nicer words than I'm going to use that someone would have to be brain dead to believe that the tree in question was not on our property, and that it doesn't matter how off the property line on the printout might be, it would be completely impossible that anyone would ever be stupid enough to believe it was that far off. We simply gave them the number to the surveyor that Ian hired. They sighed, saying they would contact the surveyor and investigate the matter further, but reiterated that we had about 2 weeks to get the payment ready if what we were saying could not be confirmed. Well, we never heard anything back from them again. Remember the consequences I mentioned for giving false survey results? Even if the surveyor admitted to accepting a bribe, there was no way that they paid him enough to make up for all of his possible losses. He would probably have to leave the country at this point. So there was no way that he was going to give the insurance company anything different from what he gave us or Ian. We called the insurance company later to see what we could find out about the issue. The agent seemed pretty happy reading through the notes. They couldn't tell us too much due to confidentiality reasons, but they could tell us that Ian obviously disputed the claim just like we did, saying the property did not belong to her and that the surveyor confirmed the results with them, and that considering that we were not arguing with the survey results and that the surveyor was hired by Ian themselves, there was no reason whatsoever for the insurance company to believe that the results were false. As long as we aren't disputing the results, then the full responsibility for all damages caused by the fallen tree should be on Ian. They couldn't say anything more than that though. We were satisfied with that much. It was about what we expected. The aftermath. So as you can probably tell from my backstory, Ian didn't have a huge problem paying the money to the insurance company, though they obviously were not happy about it. We don't know how much money they have or had saved up, but it seems like it was enough to pay it off without having to sell any more of their land. Since then, we've mostly stayed quiet about the property dispute, but we are still considering saving up to hire a surveyor to get our land back. At this point, it's more about the principle of the matter than it is about the actual land. As far as Ian goes, though, we can tell whenever she looks at us now that she is definitely not pleased with us. She does not seem to like the fact that we let her have our land for some reason. It's free land. How can you complain about that? LOL. At this point, she could try to spread rumors about us, but it would probably backfire as we've made friends with a very good portion of our neighborhood, and nobody trusts Ian any longer since they found out that ES was literally stealing from everyone in the neighborhood under their noses and they knew about it and did nothing to stop it. Ian is basically stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point, and we're just sitting back and watching the fires they started burn to the ground. Can't wait to see what happens next. Oh, this is just a little extra for anyone who wants some extra fun. While we were contemplating a privacy fence, we decided to put up an invisible dog fence for our dogs. For anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's a small electrical wire that you bury under the ground. Then you attach a special collar to the dog's neck that, if they get too close, it will let out a beep that the dogs really do not like. If they keep going, it will apply a very mild shock to the dogs. We don't believe in shock collars, so we had to be convinced first, and one of us actually held it and walked across the line. It was something that you could feel but didn't really hurt, just left you a little tingly. Anyways, you're actually supposed to condition the dogs to the beep before you just let them loose with it, so ideally they would never even feel the shock in the first place. They would just hear the beep and turn around. We tried to do this so that we could let our dogs roam around our yard and not be cooped up in the house all day. But at the time we could not afford an actual privacy fence yet. We had it well into our property, partly because it wasn't that long and also partly because we wanted to avoid our dogs getting anywhere close to Ian's property. Anne must have thought we were marking where we wanted to put our privacy fence or something because she accidentally ran over it with her lawn mower, even though it was more than 5 foot past what she claimed to be the property line. We all learned that day that electrical lawnmowers do not play very well with electrified wires. Her mower was completely trashed. Every electrical component was ruined. She had to buy a whole new mower just because she wanted to be petty and run over our markers. The best part about it is that since it was so far over the property line, she had no way of trying to blame it on us. She did obviously try to spread her rumors, but they didn't go very far. It would have been so stupid to blame us that she didn't even try. She never even asked us to buy her a new mower or anything. I guess she knew how we'd respond if she did. LOL. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed the story. I have another one coming up about a different situation. How my mother's malicious compliance cost her company over $100 million and got her entire department completely and permanently shut down. But it's late and I'm going to bed. I'll tell that story tomorrow or something. Be looking out for it. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I left a party after a stupid prank and it tore my family apart. For as long as I can remember in my family, almost any time I got up from my seat, someone would take it either to be funny or to claim it as if no one was using it. As a teenager, it literally got to the point I bought my own folding chair so I could pick it up and carry it with me. If I left it where it was, someone would take it and then get mad when I wanted it back. As an example, on a holiday last year, I got up from my chair for a moment to help with something and came back to find a kid in it. Then the family berated me for wanting them to move, but I tell them that when a man owns and brings his own chair, he expects to be able to use it. I own a very nice folding chair that's comfortable and easily portable, and I pretty much bring it to any family events because people are always scrambling for chairs. Well, the other day I went to a birthday party for my nephew. Like always, I brought my own chair, but at some point I had to use the bathroom, and when I came back, my chair was gone. Everyone acted like they didn't know where it was. I said they had 1 minute to return it or I was leaving. They laughed at first, but then realized I was serious as I started going for the door. Everybody told me to just calm down and it was just a joke. I said I don't care if they think I'm a stick in the mud. I wouldn't be bringing my own chair all the time if other people weren't always taking my seat when I get up. I don't think it's funny. I never did. My brother-in-law then pulled the chair out of where he'd hidden it, and when I got it back, one of the legs was bent. I said it was not like this before, and how could he possibly have done this to a metal chair? He said he could fix it and tried to unbend it, but only made it worse. The chair is pretty much unusable now because the leg is warped, and I don't want to risk putting weight on it. I told my brother-in-law he owes me $50 for the chair because that's what I paid for it 2 years ago. He got mad and kept saying it was just a stupid chair. I said it was my stupid chair, and this wouldn't have happened if he wasn't so immature that he and everyone else had to mess with me for years about where I sat. Then I took my now messed up chair and walked out. I wish I knew how much drama this would one day cause. Update. Well, things escalated a lot after I made my last post because I sent it to my parents and other family members. After a little while, they were furious with me. At first, some even mocked me, saying things like, "Oh, watch what you say or do around him. He might just post about it on Reddit." But when they actually read the comments on my post when I made them, they became mortified. My brother-in-law did agree to pay for a new chair and gave me the money I asked for. I bought a better folding chair than my last one and resumed going to family functions, but whenever I was there was this air about some of the family members. They looked at me like I'd sucked all the fun out of the room. My parents had stopped thinking the chair thing was funny and even scolded a kid for taking my seat when I got up to use the bathroom. The only problem was that this kid was my nephew, and he started crying when they made him get up. My brother-in-law came to the boys' rescue, and my nephew ended up blurting out that his daddy told him he could do it when I was out of the bathroom. There was a big fight about it going on. Several family members, including my sister and brother-in-law, were all yelling it was just a damn chair and I shouldn't be so butthurt about it. My parents demanded to know why they were so butthurt about not being allowed to screw with me anymore. What was their motivation after doing it for so long? It made no sense and wasn't funny anymore. And that's when I intervened. I told them none of this crap would have ever happened if they hadn't been so intent on messing with me when there really was no point to it. I only started bringing my own chair because I could never find a stable place to sit, And if they still thought they were in the right about the situation, then they were just bullies, plain and simple. And what kind of example is that to be setting for your son? My brother-in-law raged, grabbed my new chair, and hurled it through the living room bay window. There was a bit of a pause before he realized what he'd just done. Then he took off in his car and left my sister and nephew there. My parents got my sister to call him, and over the phone, they threatened to go to the police if he didn't pay for the damages. He yelled a few swears until my sister took the phone back. She said that he could either make things right or she'll divorce him. Well, that did the trick because he came back looking like a kicked puppy with his head hanging low. He apologized to me and my parents without even looking at us. Said he'd pay for the new bay window and left again. My sister said he drank himself to sleep that night. My new chair was just fine. It took being hurled through a bay window like a champ. There was hardly a scratch on it. My brother hired a window company to come and replace the window, and they had to measure and order a new one before it could be installed. Until then, the window had to be covered with plywood. The family was still divided about the situation for a while. Mainly my brother-in-law's parents, my uncle, and a couple of cousins blamed me and called me obnoxious for insisting on bringing my own chair and refusing to let anyone else use it. So I compromised. I said that if I had a good designated seat that no one would try to take away, I'll leave my chair in my car. It took 2 more family barbecues before they finally agreed to this. Since then, I've left the chair in my car unless there really wasn't enough seating, and that's only happened once since. The problem is that even though they stopped screwing with me, they were still screwing with each other until things went too far. They still liked to take each other's seats, but I guess others were following my example because they put their feet down and demanded it stop. It's been going on for decades, and they've had enough. My brother-in-law stayed out of the fight entirely and hasn't caused any more trouble, but for several family functions, a number of people didn't bother to show up. My mother was broken up about it because she loves hosting parties. It took, but everything more or less normalized again without the chair thing going on. Some have resorted to other stupid pranks like a little device you hook to a chair that makes farts. They didn't do this to my seat but did it to a cousin. This cousin got really petty at the next party and let out real farts. He said he ate a whole pack of fiber bars and had eggs for breakfast. It was damn nasty. Other pranks included hiding eating utensils, a stink bomb, hiding some sort of monster thing in the toilet, putting cellophane in a doorway, ripping paper when somebody bends over, messing with drinks, hiding shoes, and finally the one that really infuriated my aunt and uncle when a party was held at their house. A glitter bomb. They got the carpet professionally cleaned and billed the person who made the glitter bomb for it. So now pranks are just over. They don't want any more, and I'm fine with that, but the last few family functions have been a bit dull. Of course, things were only calm for a little while before even more trouble started up. Update 2. I left a party after a stupid prank, and it tore my family apart. The family pranks I described had seemingly stopped, but some of them slowly resumed. However, they were only harmless little things that just gave me chuckles. The only person that they refused to prank at all was me, due to previous events. Of course, that didn't stop their entitlement. The 7-year-old son of one of my cousins stole my phone during a family birthday party at my parents' house and intentionally broke it rather than return it. His parents were already going through a rough patch. My cousin's father was constantly clashing with his wife over how to parent their child. His now ex-wife was a bad enabler of their son. She's also terrible with money and has a very her way or the highway attitude, and she doesn't like to back down when wrong. She was one of the more outspoken people who hated me bringing my own chair and never sharing it. Although she never got physical about it, she once confronted me and said that if I was going to bring my own chair, it should be something nice and made of wood that doesn't fold. I told her I was not going to lug around a dining room chair wherever I go when a folding chair takes up only a little space in my trunk. She argued with me about it more and got nowhere. None of the family events were at her house, and she does not dictate my life. She gave me death glares for months but otherwise left me alone. The night her son stole my phone, he'd already been grounded from electronics by his father. The kid took my phone when I set it down on a table to eat some cake, and he ran off with it when I wasn't looking. He hid himself up in the master bedroom closet and was trying to install new gaming apps on my phone. That closet had a lock on the door, and the key was lost years ago. The brat refused to come out or return the phone. His mother kept telling us all to just leave him alone and let him game on it, but I refused and said my phone was not his toy. The brat was told several times to open the door, and he refused. All the while, his mother kept contradicting everything said. My cousin got fed up and started forcing the old door open. It's an old manufactured home, and that door was pretty flimsy. Just as he was making headway, we heard loud banging sounds from inside the closet. The brat had started banging my phone against the nearest hard object he could find. The brat let out some loud screams as his dad pulled him out of the closet. The screen on my phone was nearly destroyed. Thankfully, the rest of it was protected by the case. My cousin's wife tried to blame it on me and said it was my fault her baby broke the phone because I wouldn't let him game on it. Everyone in the room turned on her, and she shut up out of cowardice. Cost around $300 to repair my phone, and I had to use a temporary one till mine was fixed. Thankfully, my cousin paid for the repairs. Well, the rest of the family knew about my cousin's wife's disdain for folding chairs like the one I keep in my car, and they decided to pull a prank on her because of her attitude after the incident with her son stealing my phone. I would like to be clear that I was not involved in this in any way, nor did I really condone doing it, but the entire thing was out of my hands. My cousins got together and decided to prank that girl and got their hands on a whole bunch of folding chairs. Then they removed every chair and seat in her house and replaced them with the folding chairs. Folding chairs at the dining table, folding chairs at the counter, folding chairs in place of the living room furniture, and more were strategically placed around the house. Even the chairs on the porch were replaced with them. When my cousin's wife came home, her reaction went far beyond what anyone thought. Their plan was to just record her having a tantrum and get a laugh, but she ended up going insane on the spot and tried to get a knife from the kitchen to attack her husband. When she couldn't get the knife, she pulled out pepper spray from her purse and used it on everybody. Then she attacked her husband with her long fake nails. She probably would have tried to claw his eyes out or something, but thankfully one of the other guys there kicked her off him. I couldn't believe this shit happened all because of folding chairs. I feel like the root cause, since I'm the one who was always bringing my own chair to family events since there was never enough seating and people kept taking the place as I was sitting, and it escalated far beyond me. Police were obviously called. The wife got arrested. All the guys there had to go to the hospital because of the pepper spray in their eyes, and my cousin had to get all the scratches to his face treated. He looked like a bobcat attacked him. He filed for an immediate order of protection against his wife. They'd recorded everything like her trying to get the knife and screaming she'd stab somebody. She had to go stay with her sister after spending some time in jail, and her sister, I hear, is as narcissistic as she is. My cousin obviously filed for divorce, and his wife later spent some more time in jail after pleading guilty to the assault. She wasn't allowed near her son for a while and tried to take it out on my cousin in court during the divorce. That did not go in her favor because he was easily able to prove how unhinged she was. My cousin got primary custody of his son, and his ex got only supervised visitation since she was so mentally unstable. She's pretty much abandoned her son and is shacked up with some fat older man, gotten a serious tan, and bleached her hair. I guess she'd rather live the life of a sugar baby caked in makeup. My cousin's son was put through counseling and listens to his father more now. The kid has to be babysat a lot since my cousin has to work. The last time I babysat him, he took my phone again but didn't end up smashing it. That's progress. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My sister, 30F, wants to reconnect after making my 27M life a misery. My wife, 29F, is pushing me to make amends. I am the youngest of 4 children, sisters 36, 34, 30, and me 27. My 30-year-old sister Lisa physically and emotionally abused me. She would pick on me at school to curry favor with her classmates. It started with her calling me names and then escalated. By the 5th grade, she pantsed me in front of a group of girls, exposing my private bits to a group of female friends. While I was young, she would beat me up. On more than one occasion, she would leave me bloody. When I was bigger than her, and when she couldn't physically overpower me, she began spreading horrible rumors, including things about my purported homosexuality, bestiality, and sexual deviance. She was being really mean to me, but whenever I tried to tell the teachers about it, they didn't believe me. They thought I was making the whole thing up just because my sister got really good grades in school. And yeah, I also got good grades, but that didn't seem to matter to them. The person in charge of discipline at school, who you'd think would take this seriously, also took her side. At home, it was like my sister was a totally different person. She acted all sweet and innocent in front of our parents, pretending to cry and saying I was the one being mean. It was super frustrating because she was also really nice to me in front of them, making it look like I was the problem. But here's the cool part. My parents saw through her act. They knew something wasn't right, and even though they couldn't get the school to see what was happening, they did something about it. They decided to move me to another school so I wouldn't have to be around her all the time, which was a huge relief. They tried to get the school to understand and help, but the school officials were no help at all. They just didn't see what was going on right under their noses. So to make sure my sister and I kept our distance even at home, my parents made sure we stayed in different parts of the house. They even sent my sister to therapy to try and get to the bottom of things, but she never admitted to any of the mean stuff she did. Even with all this, my parents thought it was best for me to go to a different school in the same city, just to get away from all the drama. Because of all the mean stuff my sister did and said about me, I felt really uncomfortable bringing friends over to our house. It was like she had a radar for this and would immediately start telling them all these embarrassing things about me, which wasn't cool at all. My sister was super popular at school, kind of like a celebrity, and people listened to her. They would come up to me and ask about the crazy or embarrassing things she said I did over the weekend, which made things even worse. If I ever wore a t-shirt to school trying to just be normal and fit in, she'd twist it around and tell everyone I was trying to be something I was not. Then those people would treat me even worse, thinking they had a reason to be mean. But there's a silver lining. All of this happened before everyone was glued to their phones and social media. So when I finally got the chance to leave for university on the other side of the country, it was like stepping into a new world. For the first time, I could just be myself without worrying about all that drama. My parents were really supportive and even got me a therapist to talk to while I was at university. It helped me start to work through a lot of the stuff I was feeling, like not being able to trust people easily and feeling bad about how I look. Even though I've made a lot of progress since high school, I'm still dealing with some of these feelings. So after a while, my sister finally told the truth to a therapist and then to our family about how she treated me. Everyone was shocked, especially my older sisters. They had always thought I was just making stuff up about how she was treating me. They never really got involved or tried to stop her from being mean, so they never stood up for me either. Because of all this, I'm really close to my parents now, but when it comes to my sisters, I feel like I could live my life happily without seeing them again. My oldest sister Sarah and my other sisters have tried to make things right and fix our relationship, but honestly, I'm not too keen on the idea. Life has moved on for me. Last year, I got married to my amazing wife, Audrey. We finished our studies. I even went through law school and started our new life working. Audrey and I chose to elope for our wedding. We kept it super simple, just inviting our parents for a quick ceremony, partly because of a funny situation where I forgot to be safe in a moment of spontaneity, which kind of sped up our decision to just go for it and get married. Fast forward a bit, and Audrey and I were blessed with a beautiful daughter, adding a new chapter to our lives. However, this development brought a new dilemma with my sisters, especially Lisa. They were trying to mend fences, not just for the sake of our past, but also because they wanted to be part of our daughter's life. One day, after a long day at work, I came home to find Audrey waiting for me at the dinner table with a serious look on her face. She was holding a letter from Lisa and wanted to read it herself before showing it to me, just in case it was filled with the same kind of drama we've been trying to move past. Lisa's letter was deep and revealing. She wrote about being a victim of abuse herself, something that happened outside of our family circle, which she hadn't shared before. She explained how this part of her life had negatively impacted her behavior towards me and how it led to ruining my relationships with my sisters. Lisa had also taken a significant step by discussing all of this with our family first, hoping to clear the air before reaching out to me directly. Reading through the letter, I didn't feel much of anything at first, except maybe a bit of disdain. It's hard to just switch feelings off or on, even with such a heavy confession. So my wife, Audrey, decided it would be a good idea for us to go see someone who could help us talk through some stuff together, kind of like a guide for tricky conversations. This person is called a therapist. We went there, and the therapist wanted to chat with just me alone for a bit. I ended up sharing a lot about the rough times I had because of things my sister did when we were younger. The therapist listened and gave some advice, but also said I should keep working on sorting through my feelings. To me, it kind of felt like they were just saying that to make me come back more and spend more money, you know? They also mentioned that I should try to forgive my sister for what she did, even if it doesn't mean we start hanging out like nothing happened. Now, Audrey thinks it's a good idea to kind of let bygones be bygones with my sister and suggests that we all meet up somewhere public, maybe a park, and even bring our little one along. I was like, no way, because just thinking about being close to my sister makes me super stressed, and I don't want to end up losing my cool. Audrey didn't push me too much right then, but she's kind of been nudging me more and more to think about forgiving my sister. On top of that, my sisters have been trying to get in touch a lot more. They're sending emails, letters, and messages, not just to me but through Audrey as well, trying to get us to talk and maybe patch things up. It's like they're really trying to reach out and fix things, but I'm just not sure I'm ready for that yet. Okay, so after getting yet another email from Lisa, I decided I had enough. I wrote her a very official letter, the kind that says, "Stop talking to me, my wife, and our kid, or I might have to take this to court." It's like telling someone, hey, this is serious, leave us alone. But in a way that's super formal and shows you mean business. After I did this, things at home got pretty tense. Audrey wasn't happy with how I handled things. In her eyes, my sister, despite everything, deserves a chance to say sorry directly to me. Audrey believes that Lisa, who's had her own tough times, should be allowed to make things right. Then something happened that made everything even more complicated. This weekend, I was just doing a normal errand, picking up some groceries for us. When I got back, I saw a car in our driveway that I didn't recognize. My heart sank a bit because I had a feeling I knew what was going on. And yep, I was right. When I walked in, my oldest sister was there. I saw red. I was so mad, not just because she was there, but because it felt like my boundaries didn't matter. I told her and her husband that they had to leave right then and there. It's like I feel I have every right to decide who I want in my life and who I don't, especially after everything that's happened. But now there's this big mess with Audrey being upset and my sister showing up uninvited. There's a lot to deal with. I was really upset with Audrey because she did something huge without telling me first. She let my sister come over to our house, knowing all the bad history there. It was like planning a surprise party that you never wanted. So I got super mad, and we ended up having a big argument. I was so upset that I even said something really serious, like warning her that I might think about us not being together anymore if she ever did something like that again without telling me. Audrey felt sorry about it, but I was still so angry that I couldn't shake it off. I ended up spending the whole weekend kind of moping around and keeping to myself, working on stuff in the basement just to stay busy and keep my mind off things. You know, when you're so mad you just want to be alone. That was me. And here's the thing. I'm feeling super stuck. It feels like everyone around me is trying to push me in one direction, telling me I should forgive my sister and just get over it. But deep down, I really don't want to forgive her. It's like if someone broke your favorite game or toy on purpose, and then everyone said you should just be okay with it. It's hard, and I'm not sure what the best move is right now. Now for the top of comments before reading the update. My wife thinks that I should forgive and that she and my sister should meet at a public location with the baby. Your wife is wrong. If you aren't comfortable, your sister does not see your baby, and your sister is only allowed into your life on your terms. I could write a book on the screwed up relationship my husband and sister-in-law have. She is a two-faced, horrible person who has the entire world eating out of her hand. No one believed she could do the things that she's done, and she's flipped the narrative to make herself the victim. She isn't. She tried to be all pals once she had kids so that her kids could play together. Nope. Her husband has her on Facebook as a family compromise, but they haven't spoken in years, and that woman does not get to see her kids. Your wife needs to learn boundaries. What she did was 100% not okay. I'm sure Audrey was doing it from a good place, but I can't imagine a more messed up approach. She came to apologize without any qualifications and said that she was sorry, but I really could not understand how she felt that would work. My sister and her husband had these perplexed looks on their face. and my sister's husband tried to make personal offense. I mean, it was such a bizarre situation. Your wife is buying into the mentality that family trumps all. I used to be the same myself. After my first pregnancy announcement, I tried to mend fences. Husband said he wasn't okay with it, but I could go ahead on my own. It was a stupid choice that I immediately regretted. It became so clear that she had no problems with what she had done. In fact, using the opening I gave her to try to convince me my own memories were false. It was clear all she wanted was access to my kids and the picture-perfect appearance for Facebook. I used to be your wife. I thought we needed her to be a family and to keep everyone happy. I know it kills my mother-in-law. She will never see her grandkids all together. But we don't. We are happier without her. Even if she's good, I have peace of mind knowing that woman has no influence or place in our lives. Explain to your wife again how much damage your sister has done, and that even if you choose to forgive her for your own peace, you do not want her in your lives. Any attempts to reach out by your wife will be regarded as betrayal. My wife is also very much of the mentality that we should try and create a big family for our daughter, which I'm not too worried about. My parents have been good at keeping the peace and staying out of the whole fight. My wife, as much as I love her, can be really naive. Now for the updates. Well, I don't know where to begin. A little bit ago, I shared some stuff online about a big argument I had with my wife, Audrey. People gave a lot of advice and comments on it. Fast forward to recently, I decided to sit down and chat with Audrey because, honestly, I was still pretty steamed about everything that went down. So we started talking, and out of nowhere, Audrey started saying sorry and bringing up stuff that sounded super familiar, like exactly the kind of things people online were saying to me. Then she drops this bombshell. She had been looking up advice for our situation online, stumbled upon my post, yep, the one I thought was my secret venting session, and realized it was me talking about us. Thankfully, I was smart enough to use a fake name when I posted, so my secret identity was still safe. We had a real talk about everything. Audrey was really upset and ended up crying, and I was there munching on my snack, feeling a mix of being glad she understood but also a bit bummed out. I was looking forward to having this big dramatic moment where I could lay it all out there. But the conversation ended up being more of a quiet, emotional one instead of the dramatic showdown I had in my head. So during our talk, Audrey shared something pretty personal that added a whole new layer to why she was so upset. She told me about her aunt, someone her own mom doesn't talk to anymore. Audrey really didn't want our situation to turn into something like that, where we just cut family members out and never speak to them again. That's a big part of why she got so emotional and why she was apologizing. She was scared our family could end up divided like hers. But here's where things got even more complicated. While we were talking about all this, Audrey mentioned something about meeting up with my sisters. At first, I thought she meant the unexpected visit at our house, but then I realized she meant something else. So I asked her to explain a bit more about what she meant by meeting my sisters. Turns out, Audrey had actually met up with my sisters before, all except for Lisa. And get this, her school is right near where my sister works. I had no idea about any of this. They had been grabbing coffee and lunch together a few times, and my middle sister even joined them once. This was all news to me, and it added a whole new twist to the story. So there I was, finding out something that totally blew my lid off again. It's about how my wife, Audrey, didn't just run into my oldest sister by accident. Nope. Turns out my oldest sister knew exactly who Audrey was when they bumped into each other. How? Well, my mom had given my sister pictures of Audrey, so she recognized her right away and went up to say hi. You can probably guess how I felt about that, betrayed, mad, you name it. So I did what I usually do when I'm fuming. I headed straight to my man cave. That's my chill zone in the basement where I can hang out, maybe smoke a cigar, and just try to cool down with some friends over. After I managed to calm down a bit, I went back to talk to Audrey, and guess what? She tried to smooth things over by ordering some Chinese food, thinking it might help calm things down. And believe it or not, it kind of worked. We ended up talking more, and I was straight up with her. I told her if anything like this happened again, I'd really have to rethink our whole marriage situation. Then she started to spill the whole story, and let me tell you, it was a lot to take in. Lisa's actions have really thrown everything into chaos. She made some pretty serious and untrue claims about my middle sister's husband, saying things that were totally false and calling him things he's not. Then things got even more out of hand when she hurt my youngest nephew. He was just being a typical little kid, making noise and watching TV, when Lisa decided to react way too harshly by front-kicking him. I remember too well that kicking was something Lisa often did. It was like her go-to move for dealing with things, which is just not okay. After she kicked my nephew, my sister's husband didn't let it slide. He stepped in immediately, and things escalated to the point where my mom had to call the police. The police came, and because of what happened, Lisa was taken away for a psychological evaluation. Instead of pressing criminal charges against her, the decision was made for her to spend some time in a psychiatric facility to get the help she clearly needed. For now, she's not allowed to be in contact with any of us, which is probably for the best given everything that's happened. It's a lot to process, and it's really sad to see how one person's actions can affect so many people around them. Learning that Lisa was diagnosed with several mental health issues wasn't exactly a surprise to me. I've always made it super clear to my parents that I don't want to hear anything about Lisa. No news, no updates, nothing. So I didn't know about her condition until now. But yeah, now it's out in the open. My sister has serious mental health problems, and everyone in the family is aware of it. What really got to me, though, was finding out that Audrey knew about the whole situation and still thought it was a good idea for me to try and patch things up with Lisa. The idea of my child being anywhere near Lisa? Absolutely not happening. I made it crystal clear to Audrey that Lisa is off the table for discussions. It's not happening. She's too unpredictable, and I'm not convinced by any means that her actions are just an act. She's shown herself to be really dangerous, and there's no way I'm going to risk it. So I told Audrey straight up, we need to drop the whole Lisa topic. It's a dead end, and I'm not budging on this. It's too risky, and my priority is keeping our family safe and away from any potential harm Lisa could cause. Audrey recognized the tough battles my oldest sister had to fight, grappling with the reality that for the sake of her husband and kids' safety, they needed to keep their distance from Lisa. The rule became clear. Lisa could only be present at family events if they were in public spaces with plenty of people around, essentially to ensure there were witnesses to her behavior. She was outright banned from visiting their home as well as my parents, and any interaction had to happen away from private settings. Direct contact with the children or her brother-in-law was completely off-limits. My middle sister's situation highlighted just how destructive Lisa's influence could be. Her husband was dragged through the mud and accused of things he never did, all thanks to Lisa's capacity to weave a believable but entirely fictitious narrative. This nearly led to my sister and her husband getting divorced. He staunchly defended his innocence throughout the ordeal. The persuasive nature of Lisa's storytelling initially had people doubting, thinking maybe there was an affair. However, Lisa's downfall was in the details. Her story, though initially convincing, started to crumble when she couldn't substantiate her claims with any real evidence, which eventually helped clear my brother-in-law's name and showed everyone just how far from reality Lisa's accusations were. Once the full extent of Lisa's actions came to light and the damage she caused within the family became undeniable, there was a collective move to protect everyone involved. The husbands of my sisters took firm stands, prohibiting Lisa from visiting their homes or having any contact with their children. Lisa ended up living on her own, getting the help she needed through regular therapy sessions. These developments validated my long-standing concerns and reactions toward her, which some had previously questioned or misunderstood. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the truth was laid bare, my sisters expressed a desire to repair the bridges that had been burned. However, I was far from eager to jump into any reconciliation. I felt detached and hesitant about reopening old wounds or revisiting past turmoil. It was during this time of uncertainty and reluctance on my part that my sisters turned their attention to Audrey, seeing her as perhaps a more approachable means to mend fences. My mother, sensing the delicacy of the situation and perhaps the potential for further conflict or misunderstanding, suggested a more cautious approach. She believed that if there was to be any kind of meeting or attempt at conciliation, it should be offered openly, without pressure, allowing me the space to make my own decision. This suggestion from my mother resonated with me. It felt like a more respectful and less invasive way to handle the delicate dynamics at play. Given the choice, I would have preferred this approach, one that acknowledged the complexities of the situation and my autonomy in navigating them. Despite my hesitations and the complex feelings swirling around this family saga, Audrey nudged me toward a meeting with my sisters. She believed it might pave the way for some healing or at least open a channel for communication. Reluctantly, I agreed to her proposal, but I laid down my conditions. Audrey would stay out of it, and I wanted the meeting to be expectation-free. We decided on a local pub as the meeting spot, a place I was familiar with, and I planned to get there an hour early to settle in and maybe calm my nerves with a pint or two. The day of the meeting, a Saturday afternoon, I found myself sitting in the pub with a couple of pints already down, the weight of the upcoming conversation making my stomach churn. My sisters arrived, and we kicked things off with what can best be described as awkward small talk. It wasn't long before I noticed their husbands were also there, discreetly sitting at another table. In a move that surprised even me, I invited them over to join us. It seemed like if we were going to do this, we might as well all be in it together. As we sat together, the atmosphere slowly shifted. My sisters brought out photos of their families, sharing updates and stories about what everyone was up to. They also mentioned how proud they were of me for pursuing my career in law. The conversation, while initially tense, started to thaw as we caught up on each other's lives. It was a small step perhaps, but it was a step nonetheless towards understanding and maybe reconciliation. Right when I was gearing up for what felt like a scene straight out of a movie where I'd finally get to express all my pent-up feelings, my middle sister beat me to the punch. She started apologizing like there was no tomorrow, and my oldest sister and her husband joined in. Her husband even took my hand, looking me in the eyes to express his regret. There I was, all prepared for a grand moment of catharsis, and suddenly it was like the script had been flipped without me knowing. My spotlight moment was snatched away, leaving me to process everything on the fly. So I found solace in my pint glass, the apologies and confessions from my sisters and brother-in-law blending into a continuous loop of "we're sorry" and "Lisa is the worst." They acknowledged the pain and turmoil Lisa caused, not just to me but to the whole family, and how they now understood the impact it had on my childhood. Hours slipped by, morphing the afternoon into the evening as we navigated through years of unresolved issues. In a moment of what I can only describe as tipsy inspiration, I suggested we take a group photo to send to our parents. It dawned on me that they hadn't seen all their children together in such a long time. Of course, in the state I was in, it didn't occur to me to think through the potential repercussions of this idea. It seemed like a good, heartfelt gesture at the time, but looking back, I can't help but wonder if drunk me hadn't quite thought everything through. The photo we took, filled with smiles and a rare moment of unity, ended up being a bigger deal than I anticipated. My parents were overjoyed to see us all together after so long, and they quickly shared this milestone with Audrey. My phone started buzzing with calls from her, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and tears in the messages she left. Despite my lingering frustration with her, it was clear this picture struck a chord. Buoyed by the spirits and the unexpected warmth of the evening, an idea was floated. A combined birthday bash and family reunion next month, hosted by my sisters. In my less than sober state, I agreed, much to my later regret. This news spread like wildfire, reaching my parents and Audrey, who were both stunned and delighted by the sudden turn of events. The next morning, my feelings were a mix of a hangover and dread for what I had agreed to. The thought of a family gathering, especially after all the tension and drama, was less than appealing. Yet the sight of my parents' happiness, the possibility of bridging the gaps between us, made me pause. It dawned on me that my persistent anger, while justified, was not only weighing me down but also casting a shadow over my family. Acknowledging this, I began to consider the upcoming event not as a concession, but as an opportunity. Perhaps it was time to start loosening the grip on my resentment, not for my sake, but for the people I care about. The prospect of reconnecting with my family, with all its complexities and challenges, suddenly seemed like a path worth exploring. If nothing else, it could be a step towards healing for both myself and my family. As the evening wound down and we were all getting ready to head our separate ways, there was one lingering question that I just couldn't shake off. Why hadn't they believed me in the past? When I put this question to them, the answer I got was kind of a wake-up call for everyone. It boiled down to Lisa's ability to weave tales so convincingly that it muddied the waters. She had this knack for storytelling that made it hard to see who was really telling the truth, and more often than not, I ended up being the one who was blamed. I opened up to them about how the whole ordeal with Lisa didn't just leave me with bad memories. It left scars that affected how I trust people, impacting my personal life deeply. Hearing this, my sisters became visibly emotional and offered more apologies. Yet despite their good intentions, their apologies didn't bring me the sense of closure or happiness they might have hoped for. It was a complex mix of feelings, none of which could be neatly resolved with just a few tears and sorries. Meanwhile, Audrey has been riding a wave of happiness, thrilled by the prospect of mending family ties. My mom also reached out, acknowledging that while this gathering and the ensuing conversation were positive steps, she understood that this was just the beginning of a long and potentially difficult journey toward healing. The idea of her family coming back together after all these years of tension and distance was something that had been weighing on her heavily. It was a lot to process. The evening didn't magically fix everything, but it cracked open a door that had been shut tight for a long time. There's a long road ahead, filled with its share of challenges and uncomfortable truths, but also perhaps the chance for something resembling peace. So I guess I made everyone happy. I'm not thrilled. Getting the answers I wanted didn't feel as good as I thought it would be. But I guess there is a weight lifted, and the feeling that people know I wasn't crazy or a liar or wrong makes me feel better. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.